Hey guys, welcome to Jerry's Live. As always, I'm your host, Amy Gardner-Dean. Thank you for holding on with us there for just a moment while we were trying to get things up and running. Facebook is being persnickety. I do not know what's up with that, but they are giving us multiple false starts and then finally letting us go through. So we appreciate your patience, and we know you were waiting. So if you're playing along at home with us, just like always, you're going to type in on the search box at jerrysartarama.com the episode number. Today's episode number is JL98, and that'll pull up a list of all the supplies that we're going to be using today. So if you see something you like and you can't live without, it's a quick, easy way to track it down and be able to learn more about it. So I wanted to remind people, as we're kind of getting people logging on right now, joining us, that we've got the Jerry's Live Facebook group, the private group that people can become members of. They can talk about things on the show. They can ask questions. There's people that have been posting work for critiques, all sorts of cool stuff. It's a private group. You would have to go to groups on Facebook, type Jerry's Live, that'll pop it up. Make sure when you go to join that you answer that question that it poses to you. Otherwise, it won't bounce to one of the lovely ladies over here that are the moderators to be able to approve you for the group if you don't answer the question. But it's a great way to join up with the crew, see what's up. It's also where, when we've got an episode where we maybe don't finish a project and I finish it later, that's where that'll get posted. That's also sometimes where, if a show's really like highly technical, that's where we'll post the notes from the show so that you can see kind of, you don't have to try to watch it 5 and 6 times to take the notes on your own. The notes will be posted there. And it's also where we've got lots of links to other shows and things like that. Now, at the top of is it the pinned comment, Amanda, correct, on Facebook?
We have it in the description.
In the description.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so in the description of this show, we've got the document that you can link to that shows the links of all of the shows that we've done so far, all 98 of those. We got a lot of people that start asking a question that maybe haven't checked the document to see if we've done a show on that before. Chances are we have. So, because it seems like at this point, Katie, we've done one on everything, haven't we? So, but check that. Otherwise, Tina Vandenbroek is going to come on and she's going to tell you which episode it was, most likely.
What's up?
Tina is like,
I love it.
I know, she's like our group unofficial moderator almost. So, so thank you for that, Tina. All right, so today we are doing how-to Oil 101 monochromatic painting step-by-step. Monochromatic painting is generally the first painting that you're going to produce in a college level painting 101 class. It's kind of a way to familiarize yourself with the brushes that you have, with, the feel of the paint, with learning how to mix paint, with maybe dealing with a little bit of composition and line and just brush marks on the canvas, kind of the whole introductory feel of it all without introducing color to the mix and it being, even crazier than that. Also, it's a great way, especially if, we talked in some of our color theory class recently about value. We had our little handy dandy grayscale finder. I need to just like I realize there's a little pop thing for this, Katie. I need a little lanyard so I can just wear it. And it'll be like what was it, the door on the door of the Explorer, the handy dandy. Well, she had like a little notebook or something. Or, oh no, I'm sorry, that was Blue's Clues. Wow, that was back 20-something years ago when my kids watched it. Right, handy dandy notebook, so we need our handy dandy grayscale and value finder. You will want to have one of these, but this is something where if you learned in our color theory that maybe you did not have as much of a handle on value as you thought, that you're using a lot of color to dictate the value and not necessarily the lightness and the darkness of it, this is a good way to go back to the basics, practice a little bit with value. That's a monochromatic study is perfect for that. So real quick, we're going to go over the supplies that we're going to be using before we start, just so you know what we've got. I'm sure some people will jump on, it seems like, and always ask, what are they using? What are they using? That's where the JL98 comes in handy, because you can have that list that you can actually refer to right while you're viewing. All right, so quick product review. We're going to be using Lucas Studio today. Studio is their, I mean, I guess it's the same pigment as their 1862 professional line. It's just got slightly less pigment in it than the 1862. So it's considered, I guess, their value line. We're going to be using titanium white, burnt sienna, and then ivory black, because that is a monochromatic, means one color plus black and white. So burnt sienna is going to be what we're going to use, because that's typically the color that you're going to start with. That or burnt umber, and sienna's a little brighter. So trying to be happier and not wintry. Burnt umber would be drab and sad.
Today is very wintry.
It's very wintry. We've been having crappy weather all day, folks. So, all right. So another thing we're going to be using, the Glass New Wave Posh Tabletop Clear Glass Palette. You'll be seeing that when we start, because the camera will come in at an angle. It's a 12 by 16. Nice. Actually, this one might be a little bit bigger than the 12 by 16. This is actually looks like a 16 by 20 because it's the same size as the canvas, Katie, that's laying over here. So, but that's a perfect thing to be able to put images under, to be able to have your grayscale under, to still be able to see through it and mix paint on top of it. A good way to check your color value with your reference photo, if you're using a reference photo, before you actually put it on the canvas, so you can kind of alter it ahead of time. Because when you're using oils, you may not be able to paint over it with lightening it, or darkening it and darkening it. So you'll get the value correct before you actually add it to the canvas. We're using that. I've got the 59S, or S59 as it's stamped, palette knife, which is, to me, the easiest knife for mixing. We've got, I put the Creative Mark Imperial Professional Bristle Brush set of 10.
Say that 5 times fast.
No. But that's what we had a bunch of these of, and somewhere in the mess of these is actually the 10 in that set. I just grabbed what was in the drawer because time-wise, I figured that would make it easier, since I was going to do a 12 by 16, but had a 16 by 20 at the ready. So grabbed a couple larger brushes with that, but you'll get to see how those perform. And those are a variety of different sizes. They're flats, brights, filberts. There's a fan thrown in there, and even rounds. So that's kind of what your first painting is going to be like in college, kind of experimenting with those different brush shapes as well. We've got our grayscale value finder. We've got our tin double palette cup. I've already got it latched onto the palette, so I'm not going to remove it to show, but you'll see that while we work. I put on the list the Shell C Classical Studio Complete Oil Painting Medium Sampler Set. It's got all these great little 2-ounce size, 1 fluid ounce size, I'm sorry, bottles, so you can try all the different things: linseed oil, walnut oil, fat and lean medium, spike lavender oil essence. It's got retouch varnish and Demar varnish, and then also a soap cake for cleaning your brushes afterwards. So it's kind of all the mediums you would need to get started. But yes, it's the cute little soap. I realized the other day, you know, we talk about that I have these. There are 3 of them in my office and 4 of them at home.
That does not surprise me.
No,
There's
so
4 on set at the moment.
Yep. Yeah, there's multiples over there even. Oh, right there. Right off camera. So we like soap. We're a clean people. For the most part, until I start getting messy, I guess.
Yeah,
anyway.
Yeah.
Just people always ask what solvent can I've got. I've got this one. It's the Creative Mark Giant Spiral Brush Washer. Just because for as much pigment as we're going to be dealing with, it's got the nice little crate where the sinks to the bottom with the silt from the color, and then has the clean solvent on top. And then we're going to be using the Rambler Folding Wood Table and Display Easel. It's a new, very inexpensive table easel that, unlike the Soho Black aluminum display easel, Katie, this one has a latching top canvas holder. So that's why we're going to try it out for size. I've never used it to demo with, so that'll be interesting. And one thing I didn't have on there, because I had panels originally, and just we had the edge canvas in the studio, and I realized earlier we did not have the panel. We're going to be using the edge, a 16 by 20. That's an 11 by 16 inch deep canvas. So it's a cotton canvas with a beefy, Katie, beefy 14 ounce primed weight. we filmed that earlier today, and so the joke all day has been beefy.
Beefy canvas.
Beefy.
Where's the beef?
So, all right, so that's the list of the things we've got out here on the table, and what we'll be using to do said painting. Ready to go? Is everybody feeling good about this today?
Woo!
Do we have Cynthia for our weekly date? Is she on there, Amanda? Cynthia Lemieux?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, she was already very excited about it, so. All right, well, let's get this Rambler set up. Let's get this, I guess we're ready to, instead of ready to rumble, we're ready to ramble. Does that work? Okay, is that angle good for the side shot? Does that look all right for us? Yes. All right, wicked.
Pull it down just a little.
Oh, pull it down like,
Well, down towards the camera.
that's about,
Okay.
yeah, that's about what we're gonna be able to do, because otherwise I'm gonna be at like a wacky angle, being left-handed, not right-handed, to do this.
Palette towards the camera, just like 2 inches, and then maybe you can bring the other one.
Okay. Palette towards the camera, 2 inches.
It just some
Is that better?
yeah.
And then pull this.
It just appears different
closer.
depending on what people are watching.
Yes.
I just want to make sure their top's not getting cut
Let's,
off.
I can move the reference photo some, and then we can move the canvas
Yeah,
over.
that looks good.
Let me move this over a little bit. All right.
Yeah.
Palette good. Can we move the canvas slightly closer? Is that
Perfect.
better? Ah, and we're gone.
I don't know what's happening there, but it's
I don't
on
know.
our screen.
That's fine. As long as you can see it and it looks fine, that's fine. My screen is wonky. Like myself. He's wonky. All right. So we've got all of our supplies. We're ready to go. Today we're going to be using this lovely shell image. I actually had a shell image that I took, and then I didn't like how it just wasn't kind of like that deep enough, nice dark in the middle. I thought this actually lended itself a little bit better to the Burnt Sienna natural color. So we're going to be working with this. I've got it under our palette here, so we'll be able to check values. And hopefully we can see enough of the palette where we can see some color mixing here while we work. So I'm going to go ahead and get some paint out. Oil
That blip
everywhere.
on the table.
Huh?
Saw that blip on the table.
Yeah. Oil everywhere. It's okay. Remember, we've talked about this. It doesn't mean that it's separated. It just means what?
Needs to be mixed up.
Now, remember how the
There's
pigment releases
extra.
oil? Yes. After, for a certain amount of time, that only so much pigment, one pigment will absorb more oil than another, so sometimes you'll have some where it's, the earth tones especially don't need as much. I feel like that's very gratuitous. Like,
I don't
I'm
think
being
they need
very
that much.
generous. No, that's okay. We'll see. We'll see. All right, I'm gonna get rid of some of this extra oil, and I blopped some on the thing just so we're not. That's all you gotta do is just suck that little bit of extra off there, so it's not. All right. Get this open. I'm so afraid that this is gonna be very lavendery. All right. Okay, so now with most college classes, when you're going to get ready to start this with any painting, a lot of times they're going to ask you to put a ground on it. Actually had one with a ground on it last night that, Katie, what happened to it? Dropped it on the,
Swiffer?
yes, it got flipped onto the floor and became a Swiffer, so, and there was no
It's
getting,
mixed media now.
yes, it's fiber art almost, as it were, and my wood floor has a very interesting warmer color to it now in a 16 by 20 inch area. So it's really might be easier for you guys to see the values on just a white canvas, so we'll go ahead and do it on that. Actually did want an acrylic in hopes that it would be dry enough.
No.
It's not cured yet. It's like still very, because it's so wet out
So,
from all the rain.
yeah.
Yeah, it's not gonna work. So anyway, so we'll just use this. Now, monochromatic, what does that mean? Monochrome means using one color or hue. Last week we learned that hue is what? color straight out of the tube, right? So we're using that burnt sienna for this, and then black and white. Black will help us shade, darkens the color, which makes it darker and kind of dirtier, right, than just the straight out color. White will use it to tint, which reduces the chroma, so reduces that color strength. And then we'll use grays potentially to tone this, which causes desaturation and a loss of pigment intensity. So this is why it's good to learn this now on one color rather than also then adding all these other colors and having to kind of learn to fight that with kind of your first painting. So now some people are, somebody always asks whenever I would have a painting student and we would do this, they've learned the fancy term, the grisaille. That's grays, right? Just only a gray painting. We're doing a monochromatic painting, so we've got the addition to a color. It's not just black and white. Why do you do this? I said again, takes that focus off the color. Also helps you learn some composition, also helps you learn kind of thinning these products, how much you need to thin. We're going to talk about fat and lean as we do this. I'm only going to use the lean medium today. And the reason is that we're not, we don't have bottom layers to this that we're going to be working from. We can, if we've got questions about that, we can discuss it, but we've also got other episodes where we've dealt with fat and lean, I'm sure, extensively, haven't we, Katie? Mm-hmm. So, all right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get just a very basic outline of this on the canvas for our shell. Instead of the lean medium, I've used a little bit of the Spike Lavender Oil Essence. That dries very quickly because it's just a straight solvent. So I'm going to use that. That should dry pretty quickly. That's a fancy group of pens there, Miss Frida. Sorry.
They're pretty.
I know. They have pens over there, and suddenly I'm like a bird with a raven with tinfoil.
A bunch of artists that work here.
I know.
Every color under
That's
the
like
rainbow.
that's like, you know, dangling cake in front of somebody that can't have it. That would work with cake too, if you had cake. Do you have cake, Frida?
Not today.
Normally she does.
Dang it,
I
Frida.
will on Saturday.
All right. So I'm going to be using one of the cat's tongue filberts that come in this set because it's got kind of a point to it. So that's really handy for drawing. I'm going to do this with a very thinned out version of this burnt sienna so that it dries very quickly with that solvent. Now with this, you're not wanting to put a lot of paint on, you're just wanting to get, I'm going to see how far I can turn where I'm not going to block the camera but still be able to reach across here. Okay. Are we ready? Ready? Okay. Huh? Are you ready, kids? Kids. Kids, don't try this at home. Wait, no, try this.
Kids do try this at home
Yes.
in a properly ventilated space.
Yes. Yes.
Or wear you a mask.
Well, that's an option for you, Frida.
I know. Not everybody is as sensitive as I am. I can't help it.
All right, I'm just kind of trying to get some of my shapes in there. This is where this doesn't have to be perfect because you can fix things in the paint actually as you go. This comes in here. And some of this, like this is really dark, so what I'm going to do is take a t-shirt because this is not where you would want to use those Soho wipes because there's solvent or soapy stuff in them, right? You don't want that in there because that could potentially make your paint not adhere properly. Okay, so I've got a little too much here, but we can get rid of that with our black, okay? Now, since this is kind of the underneath part, I can kind of scrub this in. If I was anybody else, I would say go get like a flat or a bright that's a little bit shorter. All my brushes end up getting scrubbed down, so, and I like the filbert because you can draw and scrub really easy and make kind of your own shape. So I'm just going to kind of scribble some of this value in with this very thinned paint that I'm seeing here to kind of get that shape. Ladies, if you get questions, just go ahead and fire them out with this. Okay. Now, with this, I just accidentally got a little bit of white in there. You don't want to get white in until you need the white, because white dries what, Titanium White? As slow as the volunteers with the answers.
They're on a delay.
Huh?
They're on a delay.
No, I was trying to get Amanda to answer, and she was like, "Don't put me on the
I
spot."
don't oil
She doesn't
paint.
do that.
No. No, but God, you've heard Amy prattle long
That's
enough.
very
I
true.
think you'd probably just be like, "Oh my God, here's the answer." Stop. Okay. So I'm gonna want that to be higher. So I'm moving that up. Actually, with some of this, I can take that solvent. And soften that with the solvent just to kind of scrub the part out that got too low in there. Because that will dry very quickly.
Patty says that they'll be too mesmerized to ask questions.
Oh,
We'll
okay.
see.
Yeah, we'll see. Theoretically, it sounds like that'll work, but that usually doesn't happen. All right. So now we've got kind of just an image of what we've got going on here. Next, I'm going to actually just go around with some black thinned to go ahead and get some of that on there. Okay, so now this is something that we're going to discuss, because this is painting 101, right? This is what a lot of people will do. You saw I used a small brush because I was drawing. There's so many people want to do this. Okay, which one of these brushes should I use to do that big dark part? No, we're going with this big one. And I can say this with certainty because I'm usually that person. Not that it goes that small, but where I just feel like I've got a better control if it's smaller. You know what? Learning to use the brushes straight on means that you will have better control over it, even though it's a larger size.
Amy, do you ever cover the entire canvas and then pull out the highlights? Like wipe them out or scrape them out or scratch them out?
The biggest thing with that is, if you're going to start painting with oil right away, is you would need that to dry before you really start doing the next layers. So that was what we were going to do with the toned canvas, but and we weren't even going to pull the layers out. We were actually going to ooh, easel's moving because the angle that I've got to work at. We were going to just put highlights and darks to kind of find it that way. So you can do that, but the thing is with that, then you've got a lot of wet media already on that canvas, Frida. So then you're trying to add paint over something that's slippery that's going to kind of make that move around. Okay, now see, even with this big brush, I can get pretty close right up there. If I turn it on its side, see, that's pretty good detail, isn't it? For something that's, I mean, that's a size 12. It's not too bad. Just don't get too wacky with the strokes when it's close up. Slow down a little bit and use that size.
Such a good noise.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear it?
It's the edge canvas. That's like one of my favorite cotton canvases.
I love the edge canvases.
I like the primer because you can, it's absorbent enough where these lower layers bond to it really nice. And it's dry enough where it kind of soaks it in, but not so dry where adding your oils just keeps sinking and sinking, you know?
They can hear a little bit.
I was asking if they could hear the scratch
Mm.
of the brush. Good noise.
Okay, now that's, I could see that it had a hair that was kind of getting close, so I turned it around so it wouldn't accidentally get over into that shell, because trying to paint back over a black is not always the easiest.
What size is this canvas? Is this a 12 by 16?
No, it's a 16 by 20. Yep. And they can see, okay, good, they can see on here kind of the values of that in comparison to our actual painting that we're using. Whoops, not enough solvent on there. Okay, now this is where I'm gonna change some of this edge because I noticed that I've got this a little overly round, so I'm gonna kind of off that part of it. Now you can see over here that this is almost dry in some of these lighter areas that I've put that solvent in because it dries that quickly. Over here I've got a little bit more paint in the mix. We're not looking for this to be like the final, you know, straight up background color, because I probably would go back into this with some burnt sienna mixed in, but just to get our darkest value so we can, and kind of get our subject ready outlined so it's easy to see it, since that picture's nice and dark.
They were wondering how you knew that was not enough solvent.
You can tell by how your brush feels on the canvas. Wet paint, in case you didn't hear what she asked, because I don't know if the mic's picking you guys up or not today. She asked, how do I know that's not enough solvent that I'd added, and that's why I needed to add more. The paint straight out of the tube is going to have some drag to it with this brand. Some brands will be wetter and some won't be, but this brand, there's some drag to it, so it's sticky. It's like you got a little bit of honey on the brush, if that makes sense. So you can tell by that grab on the canvas texture that that's definitely doesn't have enough solvent to make it slip and slide where it's going to kind of move around. At the same time, you can tell if you've got too much solvent when it's starting to get, you know, really wet and messy and all that. In here, if I was doing this with like a lean medium, this would be too wet. This wouldn't be dry enough for me to layer on top of. But you can see, this is already, see, look, dry to the touch. Okay, because that's how quick that lavender essence evaporates, the spike lavender. So obviously it's going to be, obviously with this black where I've added it, there's a higher oil content in it. So that's going to not be as, that's going to take longer to dry than the burnt sienna kind of underdrawing, but it's going to get there pretty quickly. You can already kind of see some matte areas in the painting, maybe. I don't know if that's picking up on the monitor or not. So I'm sorry.
You're right.
Talking through the next question.
Susan was wondering, and I have a feeling this might be because this is a quick painting, but why you filled in the black already? Like, what if you needed to make a change to the basic shape?
I can still do that. She asked why I filled in the black already. I can still do that. Anytime you're working with a painting, just because I've got that outline on there doesn't mean that that's set in stone, Susan. I will constantly tweak the edges of something, and it's actually good to. You don't want something to, in a final painting, look like a cookie cutter outline. Okay, you want there to be some interest where your line's very hard in some areas, and then it's almost blurred and soft in others. That adds like strength to those stronger parts, and then kind of a really nice softness to other areas. All I'm doing is just trying to find that outer edge of this, and I will tweak it, I will push it with negative and positive space as I go with any type of a painting. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to try to find kind of the mid-tone values in here, in this little kind of area of our shell, where I've got this here. Just to decide how dark do I want this to get, and then kind of where are the values in between as I work, okay? So this is where grayscale, took a nosedive. This is where I'm always telling people to squint, and I noticed on the comments from last week, some people were saying, I don't see it, I don't see it. And part of that might be our cameras, but if you squint with that, maybe it'd be easier to hold it up here since the glass may have some sheen. If you squint, the value of kind of the hole here is not that far off of number 2. It's a little bit actually darker, I think, than number 2. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
So I'm going to want to kind of get that darker value, and then I can tap it on my glass here to see kind of is this going to work or is it not. Now, with this, since it's a monochromatic painting, I can do one of two things. I could make this have some brown in it. I could make it just a dark gray. I don't have to use this color. It's good to have it there. Now, for small areas like this, I do not always use a palette knife. I will just touch the paint and get that. And just kind of see, is that actually looks still a little bit too light. So I'm going to take a little bit more saturation of the color. And because this is an oil painting, it's not going to dry on me like acrylic would, so it's not like I'm wasting this paint that's here. I can still add to it and use it. That I like. When I squint, that looks very similar to that. Can you guys kind of see that through the glass?
Let me see if I can pull it up for him.
Okay. Yeah, I guess the overhead doesn't, I'm going to go ahead and start adding it up here while...
I'm going to try to zoom in as much as I can on that shell if you want to show one. There you go.
Okay. So, oh, perfect. Yeah. See how you can see that on the glass? It's if you squint, that's pretty much close to the same value, just right there in that corner. So what I'm going to do is kind of pick this part in here. Now, I'm coming down here because although this stops here, there's more shell here volume-wise. So I'm leaving this to be able to kind of put that lighter color in, just kind of at that stopping point of where that curve is going to come around. Okay, because as my drawing went, I noticed that it's not really true to scale. So I'm constantly tweaking. I draw on paint rather than get a drawing on there first, because you always notice as you're working that you've screwed something up a little bit here or there. So it's better to teach yourself to accept that it's okay to keep tweaking it as you go. There's so many people that are like, no, but the drawing is done. It's just going to have to look like that. Don't throw your artwork away. Never be satisfied. Keep tweaking it. Okay, I'm going to add some more brown. Some more of that burnt sienna and a little bit. Kind of see how that's pretty close to that. All right. So I'm just kind of tweaking this. This is just a slight step lighter than this. Now right now I'm just kind of using that color itself. I'm actually going to add a little bit of lean medium. So if I want this to go on a little softer, I still have some of that spike lavender oil in my brush. I wet it down before I started, but I'm not sure how much of the lean medium I want to add just quite yet. Okay, can you guys see, can you see with that above camera, that value change at all, or is it kind of hard to see with the camera that this is slightly different than...
You can see a little better
Okay.
on ours than you can on that one.
Okay, good. All right, and then I see down in here, this is very dark as well. So I'm going to get a little bit more of that spike lavender. I'm going to use that same color just to kind of go along where I'm seeing this at. Okay. Really dry brush a little bit of this in. This is what I call notes. This isn't going to stay like this, but this is notes to kind of remind myself not to. Sometimes when I paint, I get really excited and I'm like, oh, look, I'm done. I leave little notes to myself everywhere. So some part that doesn't look unfinished, I'll remember why, rather than taking a physical pen and leaving a note to myself somewhere else. It's just painter notes. All right, so got that in there. Then kind of the next value change, I'm going to go slightly out from here. I'm just going to keep adding that little bit more white and kind of see what happens. That is too gray, so I'm going to bring in some, I don't like how gray that is. I'm going to bring in a little bit more saturation with the brown itself and then mix some more of that. There, I like that better. Can you guys see that that's pretty close? Pretty similar value-wise there.
Yeah, you can't even see it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I did that. Now, before I put that on, I'm gonna wet a little bit down with that solvent. Now up here it's a lot easier to see because and there's some roundness to this shell interior, right? I don't want to make straight lines because I'm wanting my brush strokes to help kind of read as the actual volume of that shell. Again, I've got a little bit more wet on there than I wanted, so I'm blotting that same brush, and then with a dry brush, I'm going to come in and just kind of scumble it a little bit there. To kind of make that little bit lighter tone, but use that same color. All we're doing is an underpainting for this. I can go back in with other colors and add some of kind of that kind of a little bit brighter tone, maybe with a little white to make it a little more pink. But I'm just kind of trying to see what I've got here. This is going to need a little bit more white with that black. All right, so I'm going to start going along and enhancing this edge and finding that. Notice how my hand is locked. I'm kind of using this almost like as a fulcrum here to find that rounded edge. It's not quite round, it's a little straight right there. So I'm going to bring that down. Do you have any questions, or we just kind of all have a bad case of the Tuesdays and the chilling out?
Just watching.
Okay.
Celine was wondering what's in the brush washer.
The brush washer has some of the lavender brush cleaner in it. So that I'm kind of using the same, rather than a mineral spirits or something like that, I'm still using kind of the same products, so they work nicely together. And then if I don't get it all blotted out, it's just a milder version of that solvent that I'm using. Mm-hmm. So it's gonna still play well with what I'm doing. Okay. See how we're starting to form that kind of edge there, right? It's almost like sculpture. We're starting to kind of sculpt it out. Add a little bit of white here. Touch more of that to make it a little bit more red, a little more saturation. It's going to kind of go in and kind of touch and pull a little of that black out where we kind of went into it. And then I'm going to blot that out just so it's pulling some of that color out, so it suggests that kind of turn, but without actually keeping that color there. Because once you start pulling that black and you don't rinse the excess out of your brush, you will have black everywhere. Adding a little bit more white. That's kind of the value of in here. So I'm going to start kind of pulling up some of this kind of grayed out color. Can you guys see how I'm kind of cutting back and forth between the between under my glass here, just making sure that that's actually going to match that pretty well with that value? Is this starting to make a little bit more sense to everybody? Mm-hmm. Let me know if that's what they're saying. So, because I know that was something that everybody seemed like they had a little bit of problem with. So I just want to make sure that this demo is making that make more sense.
They've never seen working under glass, and they like it.
Okay. It's a handy thing to do. It's not something that I've ever done, and I've seen, recently I saw some instructors that talked more about value using that as a technique, and I was like, hey, we sell this palettes, that's a good idea. Okay, see how these little touches in here and there all of a sudden are starting to make this twist in, right? It's not flat anymore. Starting to make this look like voluminous and more rounded. So all we're gonna do is kind of go around. It's bad to like just, I started here, but notice I'm not still working out. I'm trying to kind of go around to all sorts of spaces. All right, just to kind of be working across the whole thing rather than getting one whole area really done and then going, ew, I didn't work over there yet. All right, now I'm using a little bit of the whiter white. I am putting a good bit of this spike lavender in it. Actually, this is probably not the brush. Now that I've gotten that, let's get another one of these filberts just for a little bit more. Actually, I'm gonna do something I've never done. I'm gonna use a round, Katie.
What?
What?
Really?
An oil round, yes. Because I want to work on the edge, kind of
weird.
finding this edge. I know. It's a first. I don't like rounds.
Man, if this was yesterday, I think you were April Fool's in this.
I know. Okay, so I'm putting some solvent on that so that white's not going to take as long to dry. I just want to, this is kind of a hard angle because I'm so twisted around. Oh, I got some black in it.
Do you think the glass could take the place of a color checker?
What does that mean?
Like, I guess if you can show it on your, if you can like test it on the glass, would you really need a color mixing guide or?
If you're trying to just do a color photo from it, but right now we're just checking values.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it would help, but a color mixing guide's not going to tell you what you need to mix with what to get something. This is just a monochromatic. Obviously, we're not getting the same color as this. We're looking for the same value, so the same kind of where it is on the grayscale, right? I mean, I guess you could theoretically use it. It's just not a replacement for a good kind of color chart, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
I can see this, but it's really hard to see on the screen because it's white. Nope, it's picking up black, so we're gonna get rid of that. And wait till the black's got some chance to dry. Actually, I'm gonna go back in with this and some solvent and see if I can wipe that out. Okay, there. I started picking up some black because my black was not completely dry. So I'm wiping that back out because it was starting to ruin my nice clean line. All right. See what happens when you use a round. Oh, drag through your black. All right. Okay, so I've got kind of this with this whitish. I will use the round to, it picked up black again. Dang it. See, I expect rounds to be really round. It's not as really round. You know why? Because I use rounds in acrylic. Because they're pointier than a bristle round. I'm gonna wipe that little bit of excess out. All right. We'll let that dry a little bit. I'm gonna go ahead and put this through here. Now see how that's showing up? That's because that's over that nice dry burnt sienna that I had, right? Now this isn't straight white. It's got a little bit of burnt sienna in it. I'm just trying to find this kind of nice little shape.
YouTube viewer PCM Designs wanted to know if you ever make pre-mixed gradations of color on, he said on the class, but I think what he means is on the glass palette prior to using it on the canvas. Or do you just mix your colors as you go?
You can do that. I tend to not, and I'll tell you why. Because I think, especially when you're learning, you're not gonna, it's helping you mix large amounts of color. It's taking a lot of time and you may not use all that color, number one. And number two, people tend to feel comfortable with the colors they've made and not kind of learn to mix on the fly. And I think a big part of being a really successful oil painter is being able to be mixing as you go, if that makes sense, and make corrections and additions as you go. Because otherwise, it starts, I've seen a lot of people that get too much comfortable and too attached, if that makes sense to the viewer, way too attached to those colors that you've pre-mixed. So sometimes it'll start looking way too much like a paint by number. So that would be the only thing that I would say. If you like that idea and it appeals to you, I would caution you to not mix a whole lot of color all at once. And I would caution you to try to kind of also adapt and variate with those colors kind of within themselves, if that makes any sense. Plus with this, when you're adding one color with the black and the white instead of just the variations, each color is going to perform differently. Each color is going to, some colors take a lot of white to tint because they've got really high color strength, right? Some of them you put a little bit of white in and the color goes poof and is gone. So it's kind of teaching you how this color performs with black and white and grays being added before you actually have to be on a painting where you've got a time crunch or where you've got a whole lot of colors and a lot of things going on, to then need to know how the color works, if that makes sense. I mean, Frida has known me for a long time, and Frida actually reminded me that I had a painting at home that was a monochromatic that you remember from, like, it's got to be 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, because it was Michael Harding oil
Yeah,
paints.
yeah. Michael Harding was giving out oil paint colors at the Carolinas, and he gave me this beautiful scarlet color, and I went home and actually did a painting of my dog in monochromatic to see how that red worked, because some reds are very tricky, and I was like, I'll be the judge of this, and then I was like, I love this color. So I have a red painting of one of my dogs. So that was kind of funny.
One of your fawn-colored dogs at that.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Did that explain what I meant about have them let you know if that made sense to them? All right, I've got kind of a darker thing here. It's slightly lighter than kind of what we've got for our black around it. I'm gonna tweak and soften some of my edge here. How are we doing on time, Katie?
About 10 minutes left.
Okay. So we'll do that, and then this is something that I'll try to work on and take photos in stages, and so I can do an explanation of those stages for them.
You should also put up the picture of Melody so they can see that one as well.
Oh yeah, I will do that. If you follow my Facebook, I'll put it up at. I've got people that follow one and not the other, so I'll put them up at the Amy Gardner Dean one. And then I also have Crazy Dane Studios artist Amy Gardner Dean. I'll put them up at both. So the Crazy Dane Studios is like commissions and things like that I do that are the non-Jerry's related. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to go in. Let me get another brush because I'm starting to favor this one brush, and we're going to break that habit. Do nice longer. Okay, I'm going to start trying to find some midtones to fill in here just so we can kind of show what that's about. Get it wet with the solvent so that it's already going to kind of be drier. All right, pull over some of this color. I don't want any black. I've got a lot of black going on in this mess here, so I'm going to try to just go where we've got a little bit more only a tint going on here. Sorry, needed to pull up some more solvent. All right, so as you can see, this is too light, right? You guys see on that just blocked out a whole thing. So I definitely need to either add more color to get the gray value kind of adjusted. Take this off so we can get those other colors off. Let's see, right back down to it. Okay, so we've got that little bit. How are we doing with this now? That's closer, right? Yep, move that. Everybody see that that's pretty close to what we got going on in there? So I'm gonna start kind of scrubbing some of this in. It looks very dark compared to there to this because I'm doing it on a bare white canvas, but we'll be filling back in and around it. So what I'm trying to do is kind of read this texture that comes around and that stops kind of with this mark in the shell. So again, I'm gonna make a visual note to myself. This will probably be painted over, but I'm kind of trying to find where that is. You know, I don't sometimes when my son first saw me putting notes on my painting, he's like, ah, that line's not there. What did you do that for? It's about the note. You can paint over any of this stuff. Just because it's oils does not mean you don't have the ability to paint back over it. And that kind of scritchy scratch I'm doing is just scumbling.
Can you define scumbling for the viewers who aren't familiar with that term?
Okay, scumbling is when you're taking the brush, it's not loaded with wet paint, it's more kind of a, I mean it's somewhat wet, it's damp, but it's not thick, it's not straight out of the tube. You've got a little bit of medium of some sort in it, right?
Like halfway between dry brushing and regular painting?
Yes, very much so. So you're using it to kind of pull and drag the color along to put it into that canvas, but it's not, you're not touching the brush down and picking it up and leaving that color, okay? You're actually pushing the color, right, Katie? Don't you think that's probably the most, you're taking the color and you're actively manipulating it with the movement of the brush.
A little bit of aggressive brush stroke.
It is. That's why some brushes don't, like when they talk about, this is a good kind of a thing about brushes. When they ask whether brush, or, you know, what's an interlocked bristle brush, that means that the hairs have been designed in the brush so that they come together and that they hold the color, right? They kind of scoop in towards each other. That's usually made with better quality hog bristle, so it's going to be more durable. It holds up because it's designed to fold in, so it's designed to keep that shape and it's designed to trap color there. Ones that do not have interlocking bristles, you're going to do this and it's going to go like Amy with long hair on a summer day that's like 98% humidity. It's going to just turn into
every day.
it's going to turn into a big, giant, laughable mess. Hence the Amy hair reference. So that's why it's better to buy that little bit better quality brush that says it's the interlocking and it says it's the chunking, which is the better quality bristle for oil painting. Okay. See how that's kind of starting to contour that shape, right? Obviously, it's not all going to be the same. It's not going to look like that. We can come back over that with lights and darks, but we're starting to find that shape. Some of painting is as much about sculpting out the shape with the color and then correcting lighter and darker as it is just patting down color and leaving it. Yes, Freda, did you have a question?
No.
Okay, I'm sorry. It looked like you had a question.
I was adjusting my mask so I can breathe.
You were face scumbling.
Sure. I'm cool with that.
All right. See that? See how just those lines and adding those lines in those areas starts making that look more three-dimensional? It's still a flat surface, but it's starting to read as a shell, correct? Use those shapes and things to your advantage. Don't just put lines down and make big stripes. You can go in with little dashes and dots of color and actually add stuff later that will help make the viewer see this as stripes. You don't have to make them as stripes. It's as much about the nuance and the suggestion as it is about the actual. All right, see, I like that for in there. I guess people probably need to get their questions in because we're gonna be ending soon, correct? And I do want to show
2 minutes.
the artwork too at the end. So if you've got other questions that you want to get in real quick before we finish this up. Don't let the scritchy scratching
It sounds so good.
make you fall asleep. Now this, I'm just gonna kind of, this isn't the exact same value, but I like this color, so I'm gonna use this to kind of come into here, and then I'm gonna pick out my slight lights and darks with it, because that looks, I like that. Actually gonna kind of scumble into that damp color. Okay. Yeah, that's nice. That's starting to make that turn, and you can really see that volume down in the bottom of the shell. Any final questions, ladies? No? Okay. All right, guys. Thank you for watching. Take care, and we will see you next week for gilding. Bye.